of describing this human personality and the different layers of the human personality was a very helpful one. And it's referred to on many different occasions in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna by using the illustration of the onion. So just as the onion has different layers to it, the human personality, human individual, jiva, we may say, can be thought of as the self covered with the different layers. And so there's this image that we have of concentric circles. So the outermost circle will be this physical body, Annamaya Kosha. And then inside of that will be what's called Pranamaya Kosha. So this will be the layer of, we may say the senses, we may say just life breath, something like that. And then inside of that, Manomaya Kosha, the sheath of the mind, and then Vijnanamaya Kosha, the sheath of intellect. So we have Manas and Buddhi, those two. And then inside of that, Anandamaya Kosha, the sheath of bliss. Now, if we look at this from a kind of geometrical point of view, it's very clear cut and very pristine and clean cut and everything, that each one fits neatly inside of the next, inside the next, inside the next. And then there's a center to the whole thing. And one of the reasons why we have this doctrine is to try to find out what is in the center of all of this. What is the real self? Or is there any ego? Is there a jiva? If we peel away all of the different layers, what do we find inside? Now, the fact that Sri Ramakrishna uses the illustration of the onion, to me, is something very significant, because an onion is something organic. It's something that grows, that we may start out with just one sheath, and others will grow out of it. Some of them may be stuck to each other. Some may be easily peeled away. There may be more than 5. There may be 10. There may be outer ones will be very thin and hard and brittle. So to me, there's great significance in this secondary element of it. The secondary element will be this organic nature. And we'll find that there's tremendous significance with regard to psychology, with regard to growth, even how the human being develops, even from the fetus in the womb to the newborn child. It's a doctrine that's used for spiritual practice, for self-inquiry. What is the real nature of the self? With this 1880 peeling away all the different layers. So it's tremendously helpful. And I don't think that Sri Ramakrishna chose this idea of the onion for no reason at all. Yeah. In fact, we have many doctrines that have a secondary meaning that sometimes to me is more significant than the primary meaning. Let me give one example. The common illustration of the snake and the rope. Now, the primary meaning, if we see a rope in the twilight without looking very carefully, we may think that we're seeing a snake. We go and examine it very carefully. We find that the snake was just our imagination. We superimpose the idea of a snake. There's really just a rope. But secondary meaning is that because of our misidentification, the result is fear, because everyone's afraid of snakes. They could have used any other illustration, but they used a snake. Yeah. So many of these illustrations will have this secondary element to it that's very important. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, he'll use this illustration not only of the onion, but of peeling away the onion in two slightly different senses, very, very closely connected, similar senses. One is if we try to find the real self, what will we find? And the other is if we try to look for the ego, this I. We want to find this sense of I. So I want to read, this is from the Gospel of Swami Krishna, where this is removing upadhis. I'll get to this later, this idea of upadhis, but he said, if one knows his own self, he knows other beings and God. So he says in some place, if you search for Ami, Bengali word for I, you'll find Tini. There's a word for he or God or she even. Search for Ami, you'll find Tini. So when we peel everything away, that we find the Lord there at the inner core of our being. There's one way of looking at it. Anyhow, so he says, if one knows one's own self, he knows other beings and God. What is my ego? So now this is the question. What is the reality of this ego sense, this feeling of I? What is is it my hand or foot, flesh or blood, muscles or tendons? This is the Annamaya Kosha, the outer one. Ponder deeply, and you will know that there's no such thing as I. Now, there's a highly Vedantic, Advaitic, Jnani point of view that this ego disappears upon analysis. If we search for this real feeling of I, we'll see that this feeling of I only exists because of the coverings and the false identification with the coverings. You cannot find any kernel in it. So if we peel away all of the outer layers of the onion and expect to find something at the inside, a seed, a pearl, something like that, we find there's nothing, a little space, empty space. This empty space inside is infinite. Every space is infinite if we think of it as real space, not empirical space. Real space can never be limited by anything. Apparently, it seems to be limited. If we remove everything, then that tiny little space, they say sometimes the size of a thumb, is really infinite space. And even when it's covered, it's infinite. So we don't find anything particular. We may find this emptiness. If we peel away, we don't find anything at all. From the point of view of space, we'll find this infinite ultimate reality. This will be the difference between the Buddhist position and the Vedantic position. The one we find is shunyata, emptiness. The other we find is purnata, this fullness. So on analyzing the ego, it will be found that there's no real entity that you can call I. So we take away all of the koshas, the 5 different koshas, expecting to find that self inside, and we don't find anything there. Now, Sri Ramakrishna will be very quick to point out that after this inquiry, the feeling of I comes right back anyhow. But we can have that understanding that this ego is not some real structure, that it's a feeling that we have. And it's based on identifying with the physical body, identifying with personality, identifying with all sorts of things, with religion, politics, ethnicity, everything. There's our sense of, even the Western idea of ego is an image, the self-image. There's no real thing there. Yeah. So this is part of that. So such an analysis of the ego convinces one that the ultimate substance is God alone. Because there is something there. This space will be infinite space. It's not a nothing when we peel away the different layers, that we get to the real self which exists even when the layers are not there. When egotism drops away, divinity manifests itself. Then the second quote, if one analyzes oneself, one doesn't find any such thing as I. Take an onion, for instance. First of all, you peel off the red outer skin. That'll be this physical body. They're all done mentally. Now, then you find thick white skins. These will be the other pranamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, vijnanamaya kosha. Peel these off one after the other, and you won't find anything inside. So we can either say that we'll find God dwelling within, we'll find the real self, or we'll find, if we're looking for the ego, we'll find there's no ego there. We'll find emptiness there. So this is the way that Ramakrishna takes this doctrine, Panchakosha doctrine, and explains it in terms of the onion. So this doctrine has two sides to it. One is that it's really an analysis of the physical and psychological makeup of an individual. Every individual will have a physical body and will have the life force, prana, senses. We could have had a kosha for the senses in Vidyamaya kosha, but as I say, that this is a model. It could have been 6, it could have been 8. Yeah. And everyone has a mind and everyone has an intellect. Now, when we'll get to this manomaya kosha and vijnanamaya kosha, because these things develop. These develop. We're not born with all of these. This is why the onion is much better than the 5 concentric circles. We're not born with all of them fully developed the same way. And this manomaya kosha, vijnana kosha, this sense of intellect, intelligence will grow out of the mind. Because manas and buddhi are not really two separate things. We develop at a certain age this power to discriminate, the power to reflect, the power to make good decisions and everything. So these all represent these different elements that we have of this human individual, but it's also understood in terms of our false sense of identification with all of them. That'll be a very significant part. Now, we have this Anandamaya kosha that doesn't seem to fit in so well. Huh? Now, we have 2 other doctrines that we have to kind of fit in together with this, dovetail with this. One, the doctrine of these 3 bodies. Okay, so we have this Thula Sharira, this gross body, that'll be his physical body. We have Sukshma Sharira, subtle body. And inside of that, we have something called the Karana Sharira. It's also a kind of concentric things. Yeah. So this Karana Sharira, this will correspond to the Anandamaya kosha. Now, in order to understand these, and it gets a little confusing, I hope not too confusing, we have the 3 states of consciousness: waking state, dream state, dreamless sleep state. So if we had somehow a graph, we can picture a model here, we can convert the 5 koshas into the 3 bodies. So we have this Annamaya kosha. This will clearly be this gross physical body. Pranamaya kosha is a little tricky because we have prana in the physical body, we have prana in the mind also. Yeah. So we can put it with one or the other. Probably more often it's taken with the physical body, but anyhow, it doesn't matter. This is my whole point, that this onion, sometimes one sticks to the other more than the other. Okay. Yeah. Then the subtle body, definitely at least the mind and the intellect will belong to the subtle body. So if we start with the outermost, it includes all of the inner ones. We peel off the outer one, and still then it's 4 with all of the inner ones. 3, the inner ones, 2, the other, so we get to the 1. So the waking state, we have to include all 5 of these, or the 3 bodies. In the waking state, we have our physical body, we have our mind, we have our intellect, and this Karana Sharira, this will be our subconscious mind. This will be where all of our memories are stored, all of our impressions, samskaras, all of the things that will determine our likes and dislikes, where these stray random thoughts come from, very much like the psychological idea of the subconscious or unconscious. Now, if we imagine how we can function without this physical body, then we're in the state of dream. And in the dreaming state, now people will say, well, your physical body is there. Okay, this is kind of an experiential thing, phenomenological thing. We're not aware of it. So now we have this the mind and the intellect. This Karana Sharira has to be there because that's the stuff out of which a dream is made. Yeah. Okay, so that'll be the dream state. Now, dreamless sleep state. We only have this Karana Sharira, this causal body, because the mind doesn't get destroyed when we have dreamless sleep. All of the thoughts, everything, go into some just lina state. They get merged there. It's in a potential state because as soon as we wake up, our personality comes back. Okay, so this is called Karana Sharira because it's causal. Everything's inseatful. At the same time, it's called this Anandamaya Kosha because dreamless sleep state is supposed to be a state of kind of freedom from everything. It's kind of joyful state without being self-consciously known joyful state. And this is the closest to the self which is shining through. Now, if we want to add a fourth thing to this, we can say that when we enter into deeper states of awareness, if we enter into the state of bhava samadhi or savikalpa samadhi, we're in the subtle body. When we get into this state, no, let me change that. Actually, when we get into this dreamless sleep state, then we're in this state where there's some type of very subtle awareness, something like savikalpa samadhi, but there's a turiya state beyond that. That'll be when we transcend even. So because we're trying to peel off all of them, even the fifth one, we have to get rid of. So this is the way we understand this, both as just an objective study of a human being. But the real point of this, and this gets very, very tricky, because it all goes back to the mind. That who's peeling off these layers? Yeah. Somebody's got to be doing it. We're doing it with the mind, and we can say Vijnanamaya Kosha because this is really the discriminating mind. So it's all a question of the mind identifying with all of these things. With some people, the mind identifies with the physical body more. Some people with the intelligence. Some people with the whatever it is that defines them as an individual. So if it's the societal role, if it's their country of birth, whatever it is, this is false identification. Now we get these two concepts. One is called upadhi, and the other is called adhyasa. Okay, upadhi. Upadhi means anything that seems to adhere to something else. Generally, we can think of it in terms of substance and attribute. So the very simple way. Now we'll see there are different ways of understanding this adhyasa. So no substance can exist without some type of attribute to it. We can't have something that doesn't have any color or shape or form. Okay, and we can't have a color that's not the color of something, even if it's the sky. Even if there's nothing very particular about it. So these two things that go together. So this is it's called an upadhi. Now, an upadhi can be added on to something else. So if you do some postgraduate study and you do a doctoral dissertation afterwards, they can add PhD at the end of your name. That's an upadhi. So does it belong to the name? Yeah, but it's not inherent in it. It's added to it. It's affixed to it. The upadhi. Now, the Vedantic idea of upadhi is even more interesting because it's something that has no real connection to the the substance, but through our misunderstanding, we identify it and think that that's the essential nature of it. Okay, so for example, okay, now everybody sees this water. What color is this water? Now, what color does it appear to be? Green. Now, is green an attribute of the water? Does the color green belong to the water? If it did, then when I remove this, it would still be there. Okay, so this is the illustration that they give, one of the illustrations about how we falsely identify something with something that it doesn't belong to. Now, there's a double type of false identification. If we take the example of nighttime, we see the moon and we see a cloud, and we get the impression that the cloud is stationary and the moon is moving, when actually it's the cloud that's moving and the moon that's stationary. So we attribute movement to that which is stationary, and we attribute stationariness to that which is moving. So this is what they say with the real self, with the pure consciousness. We attribute the attributes of mind to it. So or even ego, we attribute that to the pure self, and the mind we attribute the attribute of consciousness. So we say the mind possesses consciousness, the source of consciousness. So we reverse these things. So this process of neti, this process of disidentification takes place in the mind itself. Yeah. So they say that mana eva manushyanam karanam bandhamoksha. The mind alone is the real cause of both ignorance and knowledge, both liberation and bondage. Yeah. So so this is not just a doctrine of how each individual is structured, but how we falsely identify with each one of these at different times. In the dream, we falsely identify with the dream individual. Yeah. So this is part of that process of self-analysis, that how can I identify so much with this dreamed individual? When I'm awake, I'm so much identified with this. The physical body. That physical body is not there at that time. So these are the different ways in which we use it. In meditation, we'll find, and we'll get to this more tomorrow, these practical applications, that we're peeling them off one by one. When we try to withdraw the mind from this annamaya kosha, withdraw the mind even from the senses, of course, and withdraw the mind from the ordinary mind. That means try to make the mind still, but still we'll be observing the whole. So there'll be many, many applications of this doctrine. It's really one of the most useful and important doctrines that we have in Vedanta, and better with the onion than with the circles, because it's something organic. It's growing. When they grow out of each other, if you know how an onion grows, and I don't really, but I've been told that it'll start just with one, and the others will grow out of it somehow. Yeah, and if you ever peel an onion, now when those who like to cook and peel onions, every time you cut an onion, yeah, you'll be able to think about this. You have to take off the hard outer kind of brownish or purple thing, and it's crumbly and brittle and everything. Yeah, but we see that some stick to each other, some have a membrane in between connecting them. Yeah, they're all very interesting aspects of this whole doctrine. Okay, so yeah, I'll just, I want to emphasize this point and just one more time, that Indian philosophy is very fond of categories. And sometimes we take these things too seriously. That, for example, in Sankhya philosophy, we have something called the antakarana. Yeah. This is really what in English we would call the mind. And this antakarana has four different aspects to it. Right? So what are the four? Manas, okay. What does the mind do? It collects, it sorts, it identifies things. Yeah. So this mind that also has to grow and develop. It won't do it in a small child. It'll do it in different ways. Okay, so that's then buddhi. What did buddhi do? Intellect, it can make decisions because now the mind is just taking things from outside and bringing them in, sense objects, and even some memories and thoughts and everything. And then the intellect will decide what to do with all of this information and will decide a course of action. So nischayatmika buddhi, they say, determinative faculty will determine what to do, and then it'll send a message to the body and everything, the hands and feet, and we'll do something. Then we have chitta. What is chitta? Chitta has two meanings. Yes, chitta is thought of as in Sankhya as the mind stuff, because we can connect it with memory. That if we think of really a storehouse, and if we think of samskaras and impressions, if we take that literally, this image of something like a ball of wax with impressions on it, with lines drawn in and everything, and just as we can think of the brain, that there will be certain synaptic connections that because we think in a certain way, do things that the mind will easily go from one to the next, to the next, to the next. So something like that. So it means both memory and also this mind stuff. Then the last one is ahankara. And now ahankara, the sense of I. Now we'll find that in Vedanta will have a very, very subtle way of explaining the sense of I, exactly what I'm talking about, false identification. Sankhya just makes it a category, this feeling of I. Now, can we really say that there are four different, as if, we're talking about different lobes of the brain? No, these are different functions of mind. We could come up with more. This faculty of dreaming, of imagining, all sorts of things. So we should never feel that these categories are absolute. Now, this is my point. Now, I'm a little bit unorthodox sometimes with this type of thinking. You'll hear many people say that they won't question it. Yeah, the mind has four different aspects to it. It's fine if we want to take it that way, that these are in Shruti and everything, that we should not question these. But if we want to think outside of the box a little bit, then we can see that it could be looked at from a different angle. One other illustration, and this is a tiny bit blasphemous, but why three gunas? Yeah? Could we imagine that a philosopher had come up with some idea of four or six, something like that? That why only, and because tamas and rajas are almost the same, we can almost group them together. Yeah, anger and hatred and everything. Do we want to put in rajas or tamas? Yeah, and sattva was so different from the others. Yeah, so these are all helpful things, but it's not like you cut open the body and you'll find these three different gunas, or cut open the brain and you'll find these different categories like that. But they're helpful. They're very helpful. Yeah, even these five panchakosha, there could be six, there could be eight. Yeah, but so we can understand these things in a symbolic sense and still they're very helpful. We just because we don't like this idea that there have to be only 40 categories, we shouldn't miss out on the importance of all this. This is my only point. So when we When we get to the pranamaya kosha, this is the one that I mentioned doesn't fit in very easily. And I would have preferred Indriya Maya kosha. Yeah, the senses. Now, if we look at this pranamaya kosha, somehow as the senses, Swami Vivekananda, he makes a very strong point that we shouldn't think of the senses in terms of the ears and the eyes and the nose and the tongue and all of these things, that these are only the external organs, that the real senses, and we know this also just with the optic nerve and other things, that these are more the internal things also. So this pranamaya kosha, if we look at it that way, will span. It'll be connected to the outer layer of the onion. It'll be connected definitely with that. It'll be connected to the one inside also, to this to the senses and to the mind. It'll go through all of these different ones together. So we see that there's nothing absolute, and we don't have to think that it could only be described this way. There could be other beautiful philosophies that have a different number and explain it a little bit differently. Okay, so we've connected this with the different states of consciousness, and let me see where we are. Now, there's Vijnanamaya kosha and Manomaya kosha. Yeah. These, of course, clearly belong to the subtle body. They can function without this physical body in that state of dream. Now, does that mean that the physical body can be eliminated completely? We'll get to this also, that because this can be understood in terms of how if we want to use the word soul, very vague, but how it can leave the body at the time of death. And really, they talk about the subtle body leaving this physical body, that they can be detached. That's an important part of these sheaths. While we're living, they may be all connected quite closely, but there's a death of the physical body. It's like an old onion that dries up a little bit and they separate a little bit. And yeah, Thakur gives the illustration of say a coconut. When it comes completely dried, you can shake it. When it's very green, the inside white flesh is a little bit hard to scrape off. But when the water dries out, then you can shake it and even crack open the outside, and it doesn't affect the inside at all. So that means that now there's been, and this is true in two senses. It's true for the God-realized soul, who no longer feels connection with the body, and it's true when the body drops off. So that can be understood in two different ways. So this Manomaya kosha, Vijnanamaya kosha, this Vijnanamaya kosha will be responsible for really the sense of I. Yes, this is a very subtle point. This is one of the things that I really appreciate, is how Vedanta can account for this feeling that we have of I. This is one of the most important questions that we have in Vedanta. How do we come to feel ourselves to be individuals? Where does this feeling of I emerge? I did it. Huh? This feeling of being an individual and being separate from other people and having our own inner life, all of these different things. That where does it come from? How do we understand it? Is it present in all beings? Is it present in small children? If we understand these five koshas is just all coming into existence at once, where we understand this Sankhya idea that we're born with these different faculties, then we miss this idea of how we get this sense of I, and it all goes back to what we identify with, and this ability of the mind to be self-reflective. We not only think, we're aware that we think. Now, we can explain this in terms of this action, this witnessing consciousness, but even the mind itself, if we just forget about any metaphysical thing, we do things, we're aware that we do things, and we have a sense that we've done it. Huh? So this ego is really an idea. There's a sense of selfness that we all have, and it's different with everyone, and it changes throughout a whole lifetime. See, all of these things can change. This is one of the ways that we can separate this witnessing consciousness from even the mind, because the sense of who we are may change radically. We may think that we may be an atheist one day, and the next day something happens, and everything is God, save me, this and that. But I know I'm the same person, even though I'm a completely different person. We'll say to somebody, I'm a completely different person. You won't recognize me, but it's the same I. Huh? I was that one day, and now I'm this. When we wake up from a dream, we don't say this fellow in the dream did all of this. I did it. The same sense of I. So it all belongs to the mind. This feeling, it's a feeling of I that we have. So this will be what we have in this Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha especially. Now, how are we doing here? We go till what time? 8:30. Okay. Okay, so we see all of these things are going to be growing, and okay, so now let's try to look at this from the point of view of the growth of the individual. And we can take it all the way back to the one single cell that's considered an egg, because it can be fertilized and can start multiplying and turn into a human being. Yeah. Now, prana is there. And none of this is, we have all this right to life and abortion stuff. Forget about that. We're not going to look at it from that point of view. But even before, there's life. It's a living cell. Prana is there. And now it'll start to multiply, and this multiplying will be the Annamaya Kosha. This Annamaya Kosha, right? Then little by little, we'll get the development of the senses, all within the womb, a little bit. So we have, there's a belief among many different traditions that the child in the womb can hear. So nowadays it's very fashionable for people to play music in this country also. Yeah, they'll have Beethoven for babies, things like that the mother will play with the idea that the child can somehow hear. Now, how developed is the mind at that point? We don't know. How developed are the senses? There's evidence that the development of the senses and the development of the fetus mirrors the evolutionary development of human beings. So that at one point there even seemed to be gills. Yeah, that when the human being was not yet developed beyond the stage of the fish, that'll be there sometime, and it'll develop that way. So, what about mind? Is there any development of mind at that point? These are all, everybody has different opinions about these things, but if the unborn child, I don't want to get into any, whether fetus or child or living being, the unborn child, we say, has any experience of anything through the senses, that means the mind is present, but highly undeveloped. Highly undeveloped. And we'll see all of these stages will mirror the type of consciousness that we find in other creatures. Yeah. So that the newborn child, what's the difference between the child before it's born, that day before and the day after? Not much. Huh? Not much. Only now things are coming from the outside. The umbilical cord will be cut. The source of nutrition will be different. But in terms of mind, it's just a day. Yeah, not much different. And what is the experience of the child now with just this mind? Now, from one point of view, we can say this is a pure experience. when I was a college student, undergraduate, I was a philosophy major. And there's a branch of philosophy called phenomenology that I was very fond of. I really found it very fascinating. And it treats everything in terms of experience, how we experience things, and how things that we assume that we're seeing are actually complex things that the mind has to go through all sorts of different exercises and everything through memory and experience and everything in order to recognize and sort things out. So there's something called a phenomenological reduction that reduces things to not what we see, but what's present to consciousness. And what's present to consciousness is not objects. It's simply colors and shapes. That's all. And the longer that we live, the more experiences that we have, the more the mind will start arranging things, and this is what the mind does, manas, and to put things together so that we recognize things. Oh, that's a chair, that's a table. Each time we don't go through the same process again. Oh, it has four legs, and it must be a table. No, and with people, how we recognize people. Maybe the first few times we won't recognize them. Oh, I met this person before, I don't remember. And then after a while, yeah, immediately, this is my friend. So the small infant will barely have any ability to see objects even in the very beginning. There was a documentary that was done some years ago. It was called The Brain. I think that was the name of The Brain. There was a man who was blind from birth. And when he was already a family man, he was married with children and everything. They thought that they would be able to restore sight with some type of mechanical eye, something. So they were all excited, and he was excited, and he'll be able to see his wife and children for the first time, sunsets and all wonderful things. So they're very excited. So they did the surgery, and it was successful. And they thought he'll be so happy and everything. Everything was a blur. He didn't see anything, just a flash of lights and colors. He was so disoriented. It took years, yeah, before finally he could start. Otherwise, it was a nightmare for him in the beginning. So we have this assumption that we automatically see things as they are, but we don't. We have to really, the very complex pre-thematic functioning of the mind. It's not something we have to think about, so that we will automatically recognize things. Yeah. So this is how the mind will also the manomaya kosha. So it doesn't come fully formed. This is that part of the onion. It'll come, that sheath will just, it'll have to grow, and out of that will grow this vijnanamaya kosha. Yeah. So that's the point in which we start to understand ourselves as individuals. Now, if we look at the animal kingdom, do other animals have this sense of I? See, there's no, everything is a continuum. Yeah, maybe some very highly undeveloped according to us, and it may be equivalent to what a 6-month-old has. At some point they have some sense of I a little bit. Yeah. So we know that these chimpanzees and others, that they can look in a mirror and can recognize that it's them. Yeah. So there's no reason why, if this Vijnanamaya kosha can develop to some extent in them, they'll have a sense of I. It's not, humans aren't so special that way. That if the mind develops, intelligence develops, that I mean, this is a whole theory of evolution. That these things evolve, but they also evolve with the individual, and it takes time for them to grow. I had a very interesting conversation once with one of my nieces when she was very young. That we had a friend with a child who had some type of developmental difficulty, and he had to go to a special school and all of that. Obviously she could tell. She was only maybe 6 or 7 that something was different. So she asked me what was the problem. So I thought I'll give a very nice explanation that some people they'll have something wrong with the body. They'll have sick. He has something wrong with his mind. So there's some problem. So she looked at me and said, "What's the mind?" Yeah, and then here I'm assuming everybody, she had no concept that there's such a thing as a mind. See, with a newborn child, the senses go outward, and by the time we become interested in spiritual life, it's too late. We're identified with even Kathopanishad, a very brilliant verse. Kathopanishad, very beautiful psychological verse. That why do we fail to see the self? Senses were developed in such a way that they go outward. Yeah. And we fail to see the inner reality within. So these things all develop little by little. And by the time we can develop a sense of I, we're already invested in this body. So the first sense of I will be, this is me. Look at me. Yeah. And then it can get subtler and subtler. But this sense of responsibility, yeah, this goes with this sense of I. And even the legal system recognizes this distinction that minors are not held responsible in the same way that adults are with regard to criminal activity. There's some idea that they're on the mind level, but not the buddhi level. That means that they're not capable of analyzing things and saying that I don't have to do what the mind is pushing me to do. Now, there'll be adults who do that, and they'll have an insanity case. That they're not in control of their own minds. So anyhow, this is how all of these things seem to develop with this idea of the onion. Okay, now go back to this fetus and everything. What about this Anandamaya Kosha or this Karana Sharir? Now, this is very important with regard to this idea of rebirth. That how is it that this newborn child, as soon as the mind is developed to a certain extent, we'll see characteristics, we'll see different traits, the personality traits. So we explain this in terms of this Karana Sharir, this existing within the mind in the subconscious level. And it may come to the conscious level, it may never come to we may never even analyze, why am I an extrovert or an introvert? It comes to the surface. So we're born with an onion that will have the physical part highly undeveloped, newborn baby, will develop throughout a whole lifetime, and then finally it'll die off. That's the physical part. The senses also, they'll develop by the time that we're out of the womb, then more or less after a very short period of time, the child can see and can start to hear. Hearing maybe even before. Yeah, so that develops. The mind will very slowly develop. And this buddhi, this vijnanamaya kosha, and some people it never develops. Some people never develop that quality, I mean, to a certain extent, but that quality of being self-reflective, of being able to analyze things, of being able to be responsible, of deciding things based on reason. They'll always do things according to the desires, and there's some scholars, whatever the mind is pushing for them. So that's something that we actively have to try to develop. Now, to develop in the mind, this is also something interesting with the animal kingdom, because we may have, take a dog, for example. Take a bloodhound. They can recognize hundreds of different smells. They use them to find criminals who have broken out of jail. They'll let it sniff a piece of cloth that it wore, shirt that it wore. It can follow that for hundreds of miles till they can find it. that different creatures have developed a sense of sight is far greater than ours. So from that point of view, if the mind is what allows us to sort things out and identify things and everything, the mind of animals, from some point of view, can be much more highly developed. But can this bloodhound say, "Oh, now I know that he's here. Let's do this and do that"? Probably not. Of course, we don't know how they think. We have no idea. So the distinction will be this Vijnanamaya kosha. And this Vijnanamaya kosha is the one that allows us to have this feeling of I, that I did it, that I'm the one responsible, that this is adulthood, really. So this is something that we see in this Viveka Chudamani. There's a very important verse that I want to just get to. It says this Vijnanamaya kosha is identified with the jiva itself. And now we'll get to this a little tomorrow, maybe. And jiva, just in the general sense of the individual person, the sense of being a person. I am so and so, that type of thing. This comes from the Vijnanamaya kosha. That if it's just mind, we may not have that sense of ourselves as being a separate individual, being able to think, to distinguish anything like that. We can do or function and do everything, but almost automatically, almost like a robot, can do things very efficiently. So this Vijnanamaya kosha is identified with the jiva itself. That is to say, our sense of being an individual person is accounted for by the sheath of the intellect, or identification with the intellect. This is a very tricky thing. It's not just the mind functioning in a certain way, but our identification with it. And the real nature or swabhava of the Vijnanamaya kosha is essentially the sense of I or ahankara. This is the main distinction between that Sankhya idea and this Vedantic idea, is that it's something that grows out of, that develops this sense of I, and it's different in everyone. And at some point, it just kind of emerges. They say with small children that when they learn to tell a lie, there's a very important stage of development of the ego, because they recognize themselves as some privacy of thought, that I can think something and they won't know what I'm really thinking. Something like that. This is a stage in development. So it is the sense of I that allows the jiva to carry on all activities on the human plane. Okay, so this just 8:30. So this is kind of setting up. Actually, I gave two different talks. This was called the anatomy of the onion, kind of setting up the whole thing. Now, tomorrow we'll go through how do we utilize this in spiritual practice, and it'll be, of course, part of it will be what we've done. This vichara marga, this sense of discrimination. What do we identify with? What is the real nature of the self? To feel ourselves to be the witness. How we use this in terms of meditation. How we apply it to the states of consciousness. There'll be many different ways that we can utilize this. So this should be a good background now for tomorrow's talk. We have time for any questions? Yeah, anybody? Yeah, Kuna.
I have two questions.
Okay.
One is about this Vijnanamaya kosha.
Yes.
If Vijnanamaya is where the I-ness comes, then way back in the third Manomaya kosha, where we have all the components, mind, Mano, Buddhi, Chitta, Ahankara, was it that?
No. We have to say that this Manomaya kosha, Vijnanamaya kosha are one. This all refer to the Antakarana. So they both, because one is manas and one is buddhi.
So coming out of the inside, Annamaya, Pranamaya, and then
Manomaya kosha,
yeah.
And then Vijnanamaya kosha grows out of that.
Oh.
That's a stage of development that not everyone has exactly the same. Animals may not have it at all. Children don't get it till much later. It's a sign of adulthood. It's a sign of reflectiveness, that we can reflect and observe what we've done and make good decisions based on that. Yeah,
Second question
Yeah.
is about pranamaya kosha. There are two parts. One is there are these prana, apana, etc., etc. I don't understand them.
Okay.
If you could explain.
okay.
And then sometimes they say, like you were using pranamaya as more like India, or in some sense the senses,
Mhm.
and then sometimes they call them as the infrastructure, the pipelines and pipes and everything.
Mm.
I don't. Please clarify that to me.
Okay,
There are all these
Uh,
different ways of describing it.
yeah, what was the first part of the second question?
The first part was, they say this is the pipe, the sewage.
No, before that, how did you start out with
The pranamaya kosha, there are these, all they say prana, pana.
Yeah. This prana is one general term, and it has 5 different ways. It's just different functionings. The way we breathe, prana refers to all vital life functions. So it's the pumping of the heart because of prana, the beating of the lungs, prana, the digestion of food, prana, excavation, prana. All of these things are different types of prana, but also breathing in, breathing out. Prana can refer to breath, of course, but it means any type of function. So the function of the mind also has to be prana. Anything that functions. Swamiji takes everything down to akasha and prana, which we can say is mind and matter, or energy and matter. That everything can go back to even just the energy itself. So anything, prana is anything that we shouldn't think of it as just breath and breathing, but we can control prana through breath. Through the breathing process, controlling that, we can control other types of prana. This is the idea behind pranayama, that we do it that way. But it refers to all these different types of functions. Then the second part was of your question?
They say that
With the senses.
with the senses.
Yeah.
And also there are two views. One is that this is the sewage system and this, without this layer, the things will not be connected in some way.
Yeah, how do we have any connection with this external universe? We have to assume, well, this is assuming that this world is real.
Yeah.
Yeah. So forget about projection of mind, all that. So this is all based on a realistic concept, mostly Sankhya idea, but Vedanta accepts it. Not materialistic, but realistic. That there is some common universe, it may be reducible to Brahman, that's a different story. That how do we have access to it? That it has to come in through the senses, and there has to be contact. So every sense, there's some contact. So light actually vibration has to actually strike the eyeball. Hearing, of course, the vibration of air has to strike the eardrum. That taste molecules with the moisture and everything will have to actually touch the tongue and breathe through the nose with smell and everything. So there's and then the senses will carry these things to that area of the brain or mind, so that we have the experience that this tastes good, that looks pretty, all of that. And the mind, of course, the mind has to be developed to the point where it can distinguish between different things. So this is how, in the very beginning, somebody who has a variety of different cheeses, and they say, yeah, they're all good. They don't taste too different. Somebody who's an expert, they can tell what age it is, this and that, or wine tasters. So somebody with no sense of discrimination, then no experience with different things. It's red wine. It all tastes the same. They'll tell the year and the date and the country and everything. They'll know that power of discrimination will be there. So our sense of sense perception tremendously depends upon mind. Yeah, not just what comes in from the outside, but that's the conduit That's what allows us to experience things from the outside. Yeah, it all comes through the senses, through some type of contact. Some type of actual contact. Yeah. So it's not just I'm seeing an object out there. Light is bouncing off it. We know these things. And it comes. And the interesting thing is how these vibrations of light at different speeds and everything, how it'll somehow form an image, but the image doesn't get transferred. Yeah, it goes into impulses and things. And how it shows up in the brain and ends up in the mind, exactly replicating what the thing is outside. We assume. Yeah. Now, there are some people who say this is evidence that we're only seeing things in our own mind, that there's no real object outside. I think this is a complete backward way of understanding it. It has to start from outside. Yeah. In order for this process, of course, we experience everything through the mind. That doesn't mean that there's no real object out there. And it doesn't mean that the mind isn't doing a wonderful job in presenting it the way it really is. So that everybody will be able to say, yeah, this is oblong, this is a rectangle. Now, with regard to color, we've no way of knowing if what it looks like red to you will look like red to me. That's a different thing. We've no way of knowing that. And they're colorblind people, of course, that what looks like red is green for them. And yeah, there are ways of telling who's colorblind and things, but yeah. So this is that process of external objects needing to come through the senses. Sankhya has their own way of looking at it. The chitta, the mind, somehow goes out and takes the form of objects. This is their model, the way they understand it. That's all.
So there are no objects in Sankhya? You create them?
No.
So there are.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But the mind somehow goes out and takes the shape. This idea of the chitta, that the mind stuff can actually take a form and a shape. Anyhow, this is kind of a little bit idiosyncratic. Yeah.
My question is, the process of inquiry is happening in the intellect, right? Or the
Yes, Vijnanamaya Kosh. And I don't want to make a real big distinction between Manomaya Kosh and it's taking place in the mind. Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Can we really know our true nature from the process of inquiry? Because it is being like we are using a limited instrument to gauge the infinite kind of.
Okay, this is an excellent question. Excellent question. What is the role of vichara in spiritual life? That can we really, through this analysis of the mind, get to the real nature of the self? Now, the purpose of vichara, and this is something that I read in Bhuteshananji Maharaj, one of his Prashnottara something, question and answer sessions. Yeah, somebody asked him that question, and he said the value of vichara, this analysis and discrimination, is to eliminate all false ideas. The reality itself we can never reach that ultimate reality, because that's self-existent and self-luminous, but it'll eliminate all these negative ideas. So through vichara, we can come to the conclusion that at least my sense of my feeling of who I am is not dependent on the body, not dependent on the mind even, not dependent on my old samskaras, that I have a sense of I, purely self-existent. It can get me to that. And then whatever really exists, if I can have that experience, it's beyond the ability of this reasoning mind. Then it goes to this higher mind. Yeah. So there's a limit to this vichara. And we shouldn't rely on it too much. And with Swami Krishna, he makes a big distinction between two different types. One is more like relying on reasoning too much and thinking that we can answer all the questions through reasoning. He says, give it up. He says it's a dead end. If we try to think through reasoning, we can understand how from this infinite absolute reality, there's Brahman, how this one becomes the many, and all of that. We have to say Maya. We have to say we don't know, inscrutable. But with regard to these other questions, that to keep reminding ourselves that I'm something other than this very limited personality, this limited being who's considers himself separate from others, is frustrated, has desires, all of this. Swamiji emphasizes to keep telling ourselves that I'm pure, perfect, and free, and emphasize that strength within, all of that. That type of vichara, he says, or the type of vichara that says, constantly remember this life is short, that there's something to be attained in life, that these what we call shreyas is something more important than prayas, that this life is not meant just for enjoying things. Analyze what will I gain from this? Will it be something permanent and lasting, or will it be something that'll cause more bondage in the future? That type of vichara, he says, one must constantly practice, constantly be observing the mind, analyzing. But there's other type that if we think that we can solve all the mysteries of human life, spiritual life through the reasoning of this limited mind, he said, impossible. It's like pouring 5 seers of milk into a 1 seer container. It can't be done. Yeah. And you're right, because everything in the mind is within this realm of time, space, and causation, within the realm of Maya. We're trying to get these absolute answers, which we can't do. So, yeah, we have to understand the importance of vichara in a positive sense, and vichara that's a dead end. We keep asking these questions. Why is the world the way it is? Why, how did it come about? Is it infinite? Did it begin in time? These are all philosophical conundrums. Yeah, we can't get any good answers from these.
Can we consider like the process of vichara like a meditation kind of, like where you're using it to deconstruct like our attachments?
Yeah, really, the type of meditation we have in the Upanishads is more deep reflection. So it fits in very well with that type of, it's not exactly the type of meditation that we'll get with Raja Yoga, where we're trying to still the mind completely, get rid of all these vrittis. This will be a really reflective type of meditation that we find in the Upanishads. A little different also from a very devotional type of meditation. Yeah. But it's definitely a spiritual practice. Yeah. The main spiritual practice. This is that manana. We have Shravana, we hear all of these things, then we think very deeply about them. Very deeply, we try to understand what we're told about the real nature of the self. Am I something separate from the mind? Am I even the witness? And then we try to get the mind to dwell in that state. The Didhyasana. That'll be the third part of this Vedantic sadhana, the Upanishadic spiritual practice. Yeah.
I think the 3 bodies, right? Like most subtle and positive.
Yes.
You have the 5 sheets.
Yes.
And you had one more model.
3 states of awareness: waking state, dreamless sleep state.
Chariot, like chariot analogy. Krishna is he's a charioteer.
Yeah. See, this is also a very beautiful analogy, but it doesn't contain this idea of concentric circles. Yeah, but it's also very, very helpful and very important. Yeah, that and very helpful to understand how the passenger identifies with everything. Then he's the jiva. When he knows that he can walk out at any time, then he knows he's the self. Yeah. So yeah, this chariot model, again, it's a different model. We don't have to try to see how one works with the other. There are different models from the Kathopanishad, very, very beautiful, very helpful. Yeah. Yes.
So, you may have answered this, but so we are all individual minds, right? So mind A doesn't know what is happening in mind B. So minds are individualistic. But then the problem is the ignorance. So the ignorance is in the mind, and we are going from ignorance to knowledge. So when we get knowledge, is that individual mind still existing? I mean, is still that?
Yes, it will still exist. Our personality will still exist. All we have to do is look at these God-realized souls. So we look at Sri Ramakrishna. Well, he can go into the highest type of samadhi. He can stay there for 6 months. He can come back down again, and he's still the same lovable self. Yeah. The same personality traits will be there, the same sense of humor will be there. Of course, the same memory will be there, the same sense of identification will be there. Not that he's identified, but he's looking through the same old eyes and walking on the same legs and everything. So he gives a very nice illustration. He says, if you take a burned string, you have a string with all the different curves and everything, and you burn it, and it turns into just a trail of ash that looks the same. That he says this is like the God relay soul, that gives the appearance, same appearance of personality traits and everything, but there's nothing connecting it. It can't bind, it can't tie anything together. Or the sword, if you touch the sword to the philosopher's stone, it turns into gold. It has the same shape as the other sword, same appearance as the sword, everything the same, but you can't use it in a battle. You can't injure anybody. So that binding element is gone, but we go back into the same mind. Now, on one level, the mind is completely transformed. All the ignorance is gone, the fear and doubt and filled with love and compassion, but the same memory bank is there. And many of the same personality traits will be there. So we don't cease to be the same person, but we become an illumined person. But the same personhood will remain. That we will be recognizable and will feel. See, Sri Ramakrishna, the whole lifetime he had a devotion to Divine Mother. He came back from that higher state, and it wasn't that everything is Maya, this and that. He went back. There's a common expression we hear in Buddhist tradition that before enlightenment, I carried water and chopped wood. After enlightenment, I carried water and chopped wood. Yeah. So yeah, we're the same people, but completely different, completely transformed. Yeah. So something like that. Yeah.
From the individual again, how do you the interconnectedness? It's the all as one.
Now, if we'll get to this, of course, afterwards, but what is the source of this sense of I, and what makes us this individual jiva? One of the most helpful illustrations is the reflection of the sun. This is called Pratibimbavada, the actual doctrine that they use, that we have different containers filled with water, and the container will be like this physical body, the water will be like the mind. It's another model, that's all. And if the sun is shining and you look in the water, you'll see a reflected sun. That'll be the jiva. That'll be this individual. That'll be, so the mind will have this feeling of I, and we may think that this reflected sun, if we don't know that there's a real sun, we'll think it belongs to the water or is created by the water. We won't have any other understanding. But if we understand the real source of it, and we'll see that everyone has their own reflected sun, but there's only one real sun. Yeah, that's the real source of it. That's the source of oneness. That this consciousness itself is reflected in all of us. That one consciousness somehow. And of course, for these God realized souls, they feel intensely this oneness with other people, beyond any type of mere compassion. And the real suffering of them is my own suffering. How Swamiji, if he heard about some distant place, he heard about in Fiji that there was an earthquake, how many people died. He couldn't sleep the whole night. He felt that it was his own pain. Yeah. So they experience it in a different way. For Sri Ramakrishna, the one incident we know that he saw the boatman getting in a fight with somebody else and gave him a terrible slap on his back. And Sri Ramakrishna cried out, and they went and saw that there was a red mark on his back. That his sense of oneness was so great that it manifested itself that way. Now, how do we understand this scientifically? Yeah, it's very hard, but these are things that other people saw. It wasn't just imagination. So that real feeling of oneness will come in a much stronger, real way when we have some higher realization. Yeah. So, Kunal, any more questions?
We have questions.
Yeah.
But then-
I don't mind if it's not late for all of you and dinner and everything.
Depends on what Hari says.
Hari. Okay. All right, last question. And then tomorrow we'll have time.
This perhaps I'm borrowing from tomorrow's,
Okay,
but just because of the last comments.
Yeah.
People who are realized.
Mm.
After that, they have the same body, they still feel heat.
Yeah.
They still get fever and
Yeah.
everything.
yeah.
But can they, in a moment's notice, go back to that? Can they walk between the outer room and the inner room all the time? Or they have to go to meditation? So
Yeah, this is something I think reserved for very, very rare souls. This is the Bhavamukha state. Bhavamukha.
you can walk in.
See, for Sri Ramakrishna, it wasn't a question, can he enter into that state? It was a question, can he keep his mind from going up there? Yeah, that was a completely different type of thing. Swami Brahmananda, he did all of his tapasya. They said, why? He said, I want to be established in samadhi so that I can enter into it. But even Swamiji couldn't enter into samadhi at any time. Now, Thakur, of course, he kept the key. Yeah, that was a trick that he played on him a little bit. But yeah, these great souls, Swami Turiyananda, no, I don't think whenever they wanted, they can go into samadhi. I don't think it was like that. It was a very rare thing.
And the follow-up of this, which is a negative question. People say that even after Brahmagyan, when the world is real, you have seen it as unreal and everything. They say you have to still practice purity and all of that. So,
No, it'll be automatic.
oh,
There'll be no practice at all.
so the people say like.
They'll be incapable, what Thakur says, expert dancer can't take a false step. They'll be incapable of doing anything that's unethical or immoral or anything like that.
Okay, very good.
Automatic, yeah.
And
Yeah.
because they say you have to keep on cleaning that.
No. Thakur told Totapuri, what happens when it's turned to gold? Do you have to keep polishing it? Totapuri said, no, at that time, not. Yeah.
Thanks.
So, yeah. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Bhag Bhave Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May all beings be happy. May all be free from disease. May all realize the highest good. May none suffer from misery. Om peace, peace, peace be unto.